Welcome to another Coffee with Samso, where we talk with ASX companies and their stories. Today we're at the UWA Club here in Crawley at the University of Western Australia. Today I've got Anna Cranney here back with Blackstone talking about their recent release of their sustainability report. Anna, welcome.
Thanks, Tom.
Look, this report is really in some forms a baseline for you guys in Vietnam. And I guess it's a mouthful to say. Maybe just give us a quick intro and explain, what it's about and how it will sort of be the sort of starting point for Blackstone.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Noel. So I guess we're early stages of our company, but we've got big ambitions, not just in Vietnam, but more broader than that. And we thought that releasing a sustainability report at this point is important to declare who we are and how we operate from an environmental, a social and a corporate governance perspective. Introduce that to the market, but also to the communities that we operate in. We've had to, I guess, it's not something that we just write in an ivory tower in Perth, but we really had to use it as an exercise to engage with those communities, our shareholders, and our employees to understand what their expectations are of us. So it's been a bit of a soul-searching journey in a sense, which is important when you're, your early stages of a company like Blackstone. Yeah.
With the report now, the word sustainability is it something? You're in that area. I'm sort of an exploration geologist background. Is that something new that's come about because then suddenly we've been thrown this ESG scenario, right? Is this something that's something new, or it's always been there but it's sort of in the limelight at this point in time?
So I think it's in the limelight at the moment, but it's certainly an expectation and a deliverable that's been on mining companies for a long time. But there's increased emphasis in the last 2 to 3 years, I would suggest, and that's not going away. I think, what I hope is that the badge or the label of ESG actually just becomes integrated into operating a good business rather than having it as a separate standalone piece of work that's conducted by one person in a company. It's owned by the broader group, executive team, certainly the board, and then the employees working on the ground as well.
When I look at the report, it's sort of looks like an internal report that says, hey, or is it a standard operating procedure kind of document where, look, this is what we need to do. There's a section that says, this is how we're going to do it. By the way, guys, look, this is how we're going to do it. And then this is how we're going to implement it. Would that be correct?
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And it's not something I'd considered actually, but when you think about it, it's something to mobilise the team.
Simple minds, mate.
Yeah. So I guess in a sense, it's really as much about explaining to shareholders and communities what we perceive are the biggest risks according to them, but it's also about inspiring our own team to say, look, we know that these are important issues, or these are what we value as Blackstone and what we're going to charge ahead with. And setting the tone, I guess, for what we're going to focus on from an ESG perspective in the company in the next 1, 2, 3 years.
When you look through the chapters, I've taken some notes here. You talk about your sustainability journey and strategy. Then you talk about health and safety and well-being, responsible business and good governance. And it goes environmental, climate change, the people, communities. Can you just go through each bits and just give us, a rounded commentary on what it means?
Yeah, sure. So I guess, I mentioned earlier around Blackstone, we're trying to use this report to declare who we are. And When we talk about our sustainability strategy, it's not something that's fixed. We always talk about agility in our workplace and for our company in the direction that we take. And I think to be properly agile, we need to be responding to what needs are coming up and identified by the community. And then secondly, by shareholders as well. If we're doing that, then I think we're on our way to doing a good job in terms of community relations and respecting them. So we talk in the report about our approach, why we're publishing something like this early in the piece. There's not many emerging mining companies that invest in a sustainability report early at this stage. But I think it does show a commitment because once you publish it, you're required then to continue publishing it and the data that you collect throughout the following 12 months. So there's a level of accountability there that's accessible to anyone who wants to access it. And actually, I just want to make a comment on that too, because just as someone in Perth might be reading our sustainability report and asking us hard questions, or someone in Singapore or Hong Kong, I really want the distilled message to be accessible to the community as well, because they've contributed a large part to that report, and we need to make sure that we're making that accessible and I guess in language that's clear and able to be accessed by them. So we talk about the direction that we want to go in as Blackstone, and I guess we've been fortunate to engage with a number of not-for-profit organisations and advocacy organisations who've helped guide our thinking around sustainability as well as some consultants too. And then we lead into those other areas that you've mentioned, so health and safety, good governance, responsible business, climate change and the environment, people and community. Each of those areas have been, at the forefront of our thinking regardless of engagement with other people. So we know that we need to address those areas as a business and declare our position on those things, and really start to firstly understand what the baseline is, what data we have in those areas, but then start to define, well, what's our position on these things? And as I mentioned earlier, we can't do that ourselves. To do that well and to do it in a forward-looking, sustainable way, we've got to be talking to, the leaders of the province or the commune that we're operating in, that the mine's in, and perhaps where we're looking at putting the refinery as well. But then also thought leaders in this space. So that might be consultants that I mentioned, international advocacy organisations who are well versed in mining and responsible mining, and our employees who are often they can provide some of the greatest insights into the direction we should go and some of the biggest risks as well. And our shareholders too are some of the most literate people in ESG at the moment, and we're really lucky that we've attracted shareholders that care a lot, and that's one of the, I guess, attractions of Blackstone too, is that we're taking ESG seriously. So we've been able to have really robust discussions with them about where they see some of the risks are, and the things that we need to be looking at.
When you look at ESG, and when I started looking in more detail, and recently we just done the sort of the special series with Blackstone, and how everything interlinks. And one of the comments I made was that it seems that without you guys sort of colluding, it seems to connect. Everyone seems to be singing from the same sort of book in that sense. But when I looked at this report, I'm looking at it thinking, okay, from a simple sailor's exploration geologist kind of guy, I'm thinking, well, what's this all about? And I looked through it and went through all the sections, And the one thing that I think was in the front section where you guys sort of just, it's like an abstract, right? So you get most of your answers from the abstract because you're too lazy to read the report.
Yeah.
As you do. But one of the key things I got there was, it's a bold move for you guys, right? You are going to be the first mover in this. You're making a transparency comment that we are transparent. This is what we're going to do, and you're doing it starting, as you said, right? Right from the start is a baseline, and you talk about being in tune with the UNGC, United Nations Global Compact.
Yeah, Sustainable Development Goals. Yep.
And then you talk about this task force on climate related. So you're almost aligning the business, the Blackstone business, to climate change and things, and saying we will do what we say and we will do what we think, and sort of lead that section. It's a bold statement, right? I mean, sometimes people look at that and go, are they just doing lip service because, hey, of course they want us to be happy. Of course they want us to invest in the company and things like that. How do you sort of assure or explain that kind of commentary that people would have?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would agree. I'd say talk is cheap in sustainability and ESG at the moment. So, and actually, the big focus of ESG right now is because there has been that mentality in the past, is that we can talk the talk, but no one's monitoring what our actions are, or our closeout of certain risks or actions each year. So, so I guess what I would say in response to that is, just wait and see. We're publishing this as a statement of intent, and really trying to declare that this is what we're committed to. It's a journey. We're not going to get there tomorrow, but we know that these are the things that are really material to our business from an ESG perspective, but also that have potential to impact a lot of other areas of our plan and our strategy. So I think aligning to some of those frameworks that you mentioned, that's really important to us, because we want it to be grounded in good practice and I guess reputable frameworks and commitments that hold us to account. So those two that you mentioned, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we are committed to reporting on our progress against those, and our I guess our focus of the 17 goals each year. And then the TCFD, Task Force for Climate Related Financial Disclosures, we fully anticipate that to be mandatory for ASX listed companies in years to come, 2 to 3 years. So we're trying to get on the front foot with that and really show that we have a plan and are looking ahead to what we expect to be mandatory soon. It's better that we integrate it now rather than be scrambling in 3 years' time with no knowledge of all the work that's required at a later point. And there have been a couple of other companies that are, of our size and our ambition that have published sustainability reports early. So we've been lucky to be able to observe what they've done and make a statement in the last 12, 18 months as well. And I think we keep each other accountable too. The last thing we want at Blackstone is a glossy report that goes out with pictures of corporate social responsibility initiatives that don't say anything about what's our long-term vision for this community that we've made with this community, or is it just going to be pictures of donations and that's it? So that's really important to me, and I know that's really important to the team, is showing that we're in partnership with the community, we're working in partnership with them, and we're listening to the broader international trends and consensus around certain issues that our shareholders are raising with us quite a bit.
It's interesting, as you speak, some thoughts came through. In the past, where you go to like a BHP or a Rio Tinto, that kind of size, kind of where it be an AGM or something like that, and you listen to or presentation of such. there was already an ESG essence in that flavour. It's just that we didn't know it as ESG. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, yeah. So I think we were talking earlier around this work has been done for many decades. Certain elements of the ESG work, it's had to have been. If you think about good governance and responsible business and requirements from the ASX around disclosures and anti-bribery and corruption in Australia. But I think now it's been packaged into something that's a little bit more coherent for a business to grab hold of, and for investors to say, well, what are you doing about ESG, rather than just cherry picking certain themes. Tell us all of the initiatives that you are taking to address the ESG risks that you've identified.
I guess it's like when we used to have bits and pieces everywhere. There wasn't a basket to put everything in.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt, that when you go, there's a bit of fluff here and there, a bit of this and that. Whereas now, when you mention ESG, it's just like, light bulb moment. Oh, geez, that's all that kind of stuff. Look, and I think in some ways it's quite smart for Blackstone to actually put that transparency on the table now, because as you said, it's going to happen in 2-3 years time.
Yeah.
And if when it's compulsory, at least now it's already there. It's going to happen. Might as well do it now, kind of concept. Look, is it difficult for you guys to instill and manage, the local community thinking that to have good practice? Because when you work anywhere, people who have different aligned interests to, say, a mining company. Your interest is to mine. Their interest is that you're in my backyard. How do is it hard to get them to play the same tune? Because they're saying, hey, all I want is this, whereas you have a certain tune you need to follow, right?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because I'm just, as you're asking that, I'm reflecting on what have we learnt from those conversations with the community, and I think community representatives. They know, the community representatives and those that are close to the mine know what good indicators are for the health and prosperity of their community, because they live it every day. I don't live it every day. I'm here in Perth. They're in the commune or in the village. They see the issues that might be coming up or can preempt them. We need to be good listeners to make sure that things that they're raising now, we're able to respond to now, rather than letting it fester and become something bigger in months or years to come. So sometimes I feel like in mining, the communities aren't given the importance at that table for identifying ESG issues. So we've still got a lot to learn from them. And I was really taken aback by, I mentioned some of the global trends that shareholders have introduced to us and said, what are you doing in terms of thinking about this particular issue? Well, the communities have actually identified the same things, but just in different language. And that's really interesting in itself, in that we've got as much to learn from them as we do from our biggest shareholders. So they're on the ground, living what we need to be focusing our ESG strategy on, basically.
I mean, look, the whole Blackstone story, business, you want to say, is really on track to, bearing fruits somewhere down the line in the very near future. So obviously you have to deal with, the Vietnamese community. How does the language and the psyche, do the language and the psyche create issues that you guys had to stop and say, hey, look, we need to do this. We're not in sort of backyard Australia now, and then we need to get them to understand. And culturally, a lot of SU wouldn't realise that they're different, right? The way they think. And you say that their needs is again different. My river, that's where I fish from, and my forest is where I gather my fruit and stuff, you know, and where I live. You guys live in dongas. So how was that like a moment, a thing that you guys said, oh, we need to deal with this. This is a big issue, right?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, well, I always approach conversations like that, trying to find what the similarities are, because once you've got the similarities, then the differences or the issues that people might raise are easy to understand, and you've already built that rapport, so you can respond to them in a more respectful way, I guess, or demonstrate you're being respectful. Where we are at the moment, the mine and the mine expansion is in Sonla province, very agricultural, subsistence farming, a lot of forestry as well. It's been described or classified by the Vietnamese government, the central government, as a province of extreme disadvantage, socioeconomic disadvantage. So that brings other kind of implications and challenges with it, but also a need for our work, I guess, and for it to be implemented to provide opportunities for people in the community. When we had these conversations with community members, and obviously they don't end, they're always ongoing, but that was something that I felt I could really relate to, coming from a farming agricultural background myself. It's really easy to make some connections no matter what country you're from when you have that background. There's a lot of similarities. And I think, you know, a lot of people in our company have a similar, maybe not the same background, but a lot of empathy. And that you have to go into those discussions with empathy and respect, as I mentioned earlier, so that you actually listen and pick up all the nuances in what people are raising, because there might be one issue over here, but actually the real theme or thread that needs to be chased is over here in one sentence that they've revealed. And sometimes you need to give people the tools, to community members, the tools and the language to explore that issue in more detail. They might mention something about water, but then you've got to draw out, well, is it about the discharge of water? Is it about water permitting? Is it about water security and the fact that there's been a severe reduction in rainfall every year for the last year in that community? So those are things you can't just pick up from one conversation. They have to continue and keep going. And as we look at how we sort of build our strategies and how we make sure we're formalising those conversations, that's really important that they're ongoing and give them lots of opportunities to raise things.
When we think of ESG today, you know, have you sort of tested the depth of understanding and ability to practice what you need to do? I mean, as I said before, we've spoken to the team. Everyone seems to be aligned, but when you're actually on the ground and making it happen, where the SOP gets really applied, are you guys seeing that it's business as usual, or the hiccups along the way? I mean, language barrier is always an issue, because explaining something, I've learned that being an interpreter is not about just changing the words to a different language, but also changing the passion and the reasoning in the words, because the way we use words is different, right? So how is that? Have you guys sort of seen that, you know, on the ground, telling them that we don't do it this way, we should do it this way, or we want to do it this way, and they go, oh no, but you know, you can't because of this. How's that? Are you guys seeing that kind of?
I can't think of any specific examples, but I can talk more generally about it. So I would expect there to be some resistance in everything we try and, any system we try and implement, or procedure or process. That shows the health of a system. If there is some pushback or some questioning, or some resistance on things that perhaps we weren't expecting, comes back to that listening piece. You know, giving people the opportunity and the space to feel that their community members are safe it feels safe enough for them to raise things. If we are rolling programs out and not having any form of feedback, or it's just positive feedback all the time, that's when I start to question, well, what's the health of our processes and procedures and the way that we're doing things on the ground? Because that doesn't happen in real life. So there's work to do in piloting things, testing things out, making sure that we're picking up any failures or oversight from our side, and key things in that, coming back to that theme of listening, respect, giving things time, because it's a challenge for us. We've got to get things moving quite quickly to match our the scale of our ambition and the timelines that we have. I think the pilot plan is really useful for that, because it's piloting the plan and the process, but it's also going to pilot ESG approaches that we take in terms of community consultation or feedback mechanisms, and how we close out complaints, for example. So that's really important, and we can take those learnings and then move them into the refinery and the business more broadly if we look to go beyond Vietnam. Yeah.
I mean, we've spoken quite intensely, even like now, about ESG and everything else. But I can imagine someone sitting in the crowd going, are we just overdoing ESG? Should it be in small caps, not in big caps? And so what's the ESG community? How would they respond to that comment?
Yeah, so one of my colleagues who you've interviewed previously, Andrew, he once said, we have a responsibility. We can't come into this industry now, starting out in mining in whatever year it is, 2021, and not have an ESG focus and be clear on what that strategy is. You just can't do that anymore. So you have to prove yourself as a responsible business and miner. You have to have a position on this, and most people, if you think about, I guess, society where it is at the moment in terms of a lot of ESG issues, they expect that, and so our shareholders expect that, the communities expect that, and if you think about some of the issues that we've seen over recent years, there's good reason that ESG is now, as you say, in a basket, and we're able to badge it as something. It's been bundled up as something to make companies really sit up and pay attention and publish a sustainability report, put someone like myself into a position that can influence aspects of the business and make sure that ESG is being prioritised in decision making. So I don't think it's being overdone. I'd say what does need to happen is that people are being held accountable for commitments and statements that they make, and that will really be where you can differentiate people that might be greenwashing or ESG washing as opposed to those who aren't. The companies that I have the most respect for in terms of sustainability reporting, but also their ESG work, are those that are really open-handed and transparent around what the issues are, where they've stuffed up, and really demonstrated with good grace that we acknowledge we made these mistakes, or perhaps these results seem too positive, so we're going to dig a little bit deeper next year and find out and reveal in our next report what our findings were about those extremely positive results, because as I said earlier, it's kind of demonstrates the health of a company is when issues can come up and everyone can acknowledge them and address them.
I think there's I guess there's a case that everything can be oversaturated in context and in content, I guess, when it's there. But I think that doesn't take away. I agree the importance of ESG today, and I think the importance of the emerging need to have that basket, so that everyone then can say, well, all those things that are that we talk about is actually ESG, and then and understanding then that is the case, right? But obviously the playing devil's advocate in the sense that to have all this ESG means you're going to have higher costs. It's going to cost you a lot more to do your things, right? How is that? Obviously corporately you have that. Yes, you must have this, but then operationally it's costs you more, and hence could work negative or positive or alongside all the corporate talk, right? So how is that sort of sitting with you guys? Obviously, what you could do for $10 yesterday, now you need 25, or is it $10 and now it's 55, or is it only 15?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of elements of ESG that you have to comply with anyway. If you think about permitting and the environmental and social studies that need to go on, and you need to prove that you've done those in order to progress to the next stage of permitting. So that's just a cost that's factored into the way that we do things. I think you need to be careful in terms of what you take on and the timing that a company might take certain ESG activities on. So for us, that's really front of mind. What makes sense to do right now? What will be the most effective and set us up in a way that's sustainable for us as a business, financially sustainable? And what's a commitment or an initiative that is best left to be aware of, but to be parked in 2026, 2025, later down the track. So that's something that they're conversations we have every day, and it's important to be having those conversations, because otherwise you could go down rabbit holes, and our work, we could just constantly talk about ESG, but really it's about what makes sense for this stage of the business where we are right now, what our engineers are talking about and our project guys are talking about, what can be incorporated into their work now to make sure that we're making decisions that set us up for 2 years' time, and we're not scrambling in 2 or 3 years when there's a huge issue because we haven't indoctrinated the team into a certain process. So it's just something we have to be really conscious of, Noel, and I guess not get carried away with certain initiatives or programs, but really focus, and this is where community feedback, shareholder feedback, employee feedback is so important to help us prioritise what are the most material key risks or opportunities to us to focus on, because we could do 20 things and not do them that well, or they won't land because people aren't seeing them as a real emerging issue right now. Instead, it's better to focus on 4 or 5 things, go after those things hard, and then continue to have those conversations, as I mentioned earlier, with communities and shareholders, see what's changing over time in terms of global trends and community priorities.
I think I like the way that ESG is going, in a sense that a lot of people think ESG, as I said, when I posed that question, is that it's going to be, what we used to do is $10, now it's 55. But I think it's more like maybe 15, maybe even 17, because I think the perception of increased costs, they've forgotten that this was already in the equation, except that it was everywhere. And I think what you said, that if you understand the importance of that and you set it straight, you level out the cost curve significantly, because you're dealing with the topics now and not let it brew to a point where the dam's about to burst and now you have to build a big dam, whereas it was easy flowing. And I think, I'm sort of latecomer to the whole ESG thing, but understanding it's like running in any business, right? If everyone's happy, everyone's feeling that they're not being taken advantage of, I think socially everyone's good with that, because everyone understands things, right? I think that's the key.
And I think too, there's another kind of perspective to that in that there's huge opportunity. So it's not just a cost that needs to be factored in, but there's huge amounts of capital if you think about the way that ESG funding is going, and large investors are really making it a top concern in terms of their portfolios and what they're interested in. And you know, the types of conversations that I'm having with investors are, you know, they're really well versed in the types of questions they need to ask us, and that we're expected to have those answers and be very on the front foot in terms of declaring where we are with certain strategies or initiatives. And that opens up enormous potential for Blackstone to be able to demonstrate that, yeah, we're taking this seriously, and you know, we've released this report. We're trying to be as transparent as possible. It's not perfect yet, but we know the areas that we need to really hone in on over the next 2 to 3 years.
I akin the whole ESG thing to responsible, sustainable investment. I think that's, to me, that's the family name, because ESGs make sure that it is responsible. Whatever you do is sustainable, and your investment, because at the end of the day, investment is why we're all sitting here. You know, think about it. And I think back before, I remember hearing people that that the funds would look at responsible things. They only fund green things, and that's, in some ways, I guess, it sounds like people just want to have something to measure responsible, sustainable investment, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, that's right. It offers them a framework to look at it. And as you say, it's like the basket analogy. It draws a line and a boundary around what could be a fairly fluid set of concepts. So now companies like Blackstone, we're being asked to say, well, what is it? What's your package? What are your priorities? And being really clear and being able to communicate that clearly to those groups. So I think it's it's a really good time, because that makes people more accountable. When you draw a boundary around something like ESG, there can't be wishy-washy statements about just donations that they've made to some sort of centre or something like that. It is actually about, well, how deep does this go into your business? How are you measuring this internally? And what are you disclosing externally to people?
I think it's a good move. I mean, for Blackstone, it's a ballsy move. You're laying everything on the table, and it's a big statement, that we will align ourselves to climate change and United Nations thinking, the world thinking. We're going to go along that line, not saying, I'll pick and choose, when required. Look, and it's fantastic. It's always good. I mean, I love that discussion about how things are, people should be doing. And I always said that, if everyone incorporate everyone together, the business, it's always a good thing as opposed to a negative. But, putting you on the spot, is nuclear green?
Yeah, you are putting me on the spot.
Well, you'll be a mum soon. You need to have legacy for your children.
Yeah.
Mum mate said this.
Yeah.
Or is that next chapter?
I'm still deciding, and that might be one for a panel discussion later on.
Yeah, no, look, it's a very contentious thing, but look, great way to finish. Good luck to, birth of your child, and
thank you.
And look, we will work to a panel discussion. I think it's good for panel to get, just not your point of view or my point of view, but industry point of view.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to that. But Anna, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Noel. I'm looking forward to the panel and probably hearing some dissenting voices too.
And any last word of wisdom for people out there?
I just encourage everyone to read or have a look at our report and give us feedback. We're really keen to hear it, and I think we're keen to hear the good and the bad, and areas that people think we should be focusing on. So quite keen to see what people think about our first report, and I guess we'll be feeding back in next year's report around what the community, how the community has also responded to a summarised version of that, because that will be really interesting for them to be able to see their own thoughts and opinions presented to them in that format.
All right. Okay, guys. Hope you guys have lots of questions for Anna, because she's, you know, the next 12 months she's got nothing else to do. But thank you, Anna, and we'll continue the journey.
Thank you. Thanks, Noel.